The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover Patrician, Towers of Influence, our game of the week, discuss being a hobby ambassador in the School of Gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our high five game filters. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my bit-fiddling co-host.
Dice.
Sorry. Is that what it is?
When you asked
Michael
me if
McCabe.
I was ready when we went to record, I should have said, just give me one moment to get the Ziploc open and get my dice set out for the Spotlight game. So now I'm ready to record, Doug.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Well,
man, how are you?
I'm pretty good. This is going to be an interesting episode because it is late. I have had a full day, and I believe you have too, in the gym and everywhere else. So we're gonna be silly.
Yeah, but I love being here, man. I love being on the show. Love talking games, and I'm really excited to talk about our Spotlight game and our game of the week. And I have no idea how our high five list is going to go, so it's nice to have those moments of wonder and awe as well. Yeah,
well, last week we had to call an audible. So hopefully that episode worked out okay for everybody.
Worked out great for me. Thanks, Doug.
We got to talk about some keywords that we've talked about in past episodes as we've been just becoming more aware that those are things that you constantly have to kind of keep bringing up and reminding people and realize that not everybody knows all of the terminology. And if you're a new listener to the show, hopefully that gave you a glimpse into our past. So hopefully that worked out well for everybody.
Our gaming past. We didn't go too far back into the recesses of who we are as human beings. And
no, that would be emotionally scarring.
It is a family-friendly podcast here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you look a little bit older, Doug. You look a little bit older, a little bit leaner. And did you have a birthday recently?
Oh, I did, yes.
All right.
Yeah, we got a lot of birthdays in my family around this time. So
that's awesome. Fun time of the year.
Wife's is the day of the recording. So her present was for me to go into the basement and record a podcast.
Oh, happy birthday.
Stay away from me. So how about some follow-up, Michael? You got any follow-up?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if since we haven't discussed what we're going to talk about, I might be jumping on a line. But just a big thank you to the Holiday Gift Exchange, the participants, the givers, the organizers over on the Discord, Liz, one of our longtime listeners and Discord leaders over there, organized this Christmas holiday gift exchange, and it's been awesome to see. It's been awesome to receive. I know my package landed safely yesterday. I hope people are happy with it. And anytime you give a gift, you can just hope. But that was really a cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the Discord, I just wanted to call out Annabelle and some of the work that she's been doing she had a staff game day. And if you're looking for advice on how to put an event like that on, she did a phenomenal job highlighting what she did and laying out what worked and what could be improved for next time. And so I think the Discord is becoming a great resource for hosting game nights and events, and folks are sharing their experiences and what's worked and what hasn't and things like that. There's a wealth of knowledge in the Discord, and that's at gameschooler.com/Discord if you're interested. But just wanted to highlight that and what a cool resource that's becoming. And there's different pockets in that Discord of deals and thrift store stuff and board game arena and game schooling and things like that. So I just wanted to draw some attention to that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I will be teaching my colleagues 1 to 3 games next week. Next week, Friday, we had to have an end-of-year wrap-up, and my supervisor said, hey, do you mind just teaching some board games? So I think I'm going to do Scribbly Gum, Green Team Wins, and Flip 7.
I thought you were going to bring Darwin's Journey.
Yeah, I thought, well, with the expansion coming up, maybe some people would be excited. Could you imagine the rules teach for Darwin's Journey? First of all, not a game that I teach well. All right, we've established that. Very difficult teach. I'm okay at playing it by myself when I have the rule books in my lap. But can you imagine if 16 of my colleagues, we have 45 minutes. Let me tell you about this game. No, so
let's be
all
a
that
good
to
hobby
say,
ambassador. We'll talk about that later.
I am going to go back and look at that recent thread that Annabelle put out there and just talking about games without talking about the very specific gamer jargon. So yeah, that'll be good. Yeah. Good little follow up and callback.
All right, what's awesome in gaming, Michael?
Man, Doug, where to start? I guess I'm going to start someplace where I might surprise you. But last night, my wife was actually over at your house for ladies' craft night. So
you missed a great time. I was down there with them.
Yeah, I bet. You were painting minis with your noise-canceling headphones on, and kids were tapping on your shoulder. And
I watched Christmas Vacation with my daughters, and my wife asked the middle one how the movie was, and she responded by saying, "It may have been a little inappropriate."
You'll shoot your eye out?
No. Did I say Christmas Story? I said Christmas Vacation.
My mind didn't think that you watched National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation with your children.
Yeah.
Doug, do I need to tell you about this website called Common Sense Media? Dear listeners, before you
I was that age when I watched it. We're fine.
Okay, and you do your house. We played slapjack for an hour. I'll just cut to the chase. My soon-to-be 9-year-old, like tomorrow, came home just on fire saying that she played games at school last week. I'm like, what'd you play? We played Slappy Jack. And I'm waiting to hear this variant on Slapjack. No, it's just Slapjack. So me and the 3 kiddos played. It took an hour.
And finally, what is Slapjack?
Finally at 10:50, what is Slapjack?
I don't think I've ever played this. What is Slapjack?
You have a deck of cards. You flip them up towards your opponent. When a jack comes out, you slap it. The first hand on the jack gets a stack of cards. Last person standing wins, with one exception rule. You're not truly. Is this
going to be at PAX Unplugged?
You're not truly out until another jack comes up and you don't slap back in. So twice, my oldest and I are there with no cards, and the other person's just flipping up, and then boom, slap back in. That's what helped that game to go so long. I finally had to call in a reliever when I said, I got to be up early for work in the morning, guys. 10:15, I'm done. Put yourselves to bed. So
it's great moments in parenting. We all have
great moments in parenting. Great moments in board gaming that we played. A very basic game. You've heard of Slapjack, right, Doug?
I've never heard of it. Hand to heart, I've never heard of that.
I thought you were just giving me a hard time.
No.
So that's what was awesome. Is the most basic of basic games from my childhood comes back into the home, and we've been having a fun time doing that, while also having some Kickstarters arrived and getting those out of shrink and getting those to the table and playing some other games for the podcast. So no, things are good.
All right. What's awesome for me is the amount of amazing deals available this time of year.
Gosh, why are you going there?
Well, because I have a specific reason for that. So, for example, Amazon had Summer Camp for $13. Sunrise Lane, which was the game of the week, for $17,
I believe.
Yeah, for $17 or so.
$17.22.
And although we talk about the amount of games being released, the byproduct of that is that the games drop in price faster than ever before. Sunrise City had a huge presence at last year's Gen Con, and it's from designer Dr. Reiner Knizia, and a year later it's $17.
Yeah, and the Horrible Guild did a great job on the production for that one, similar to what Buffalo Games did on the production of Summer Camp. So, to your point, this time of year, these are the 4 to 5 to 6 days to really buy board games.
Yeah,
Publishers do the same thing. Publishers are going, everything's 25 to 30% off at a lot of places, or games will be bundled. You'll have these giant Kickstarters where, you might not get the complete all-in set, but you're getting a massive bundle for 30 or 40% off. So, yeah.
So I guess the point of what's awesome about that is that solid games are more affordable than ever before, and you don't need to chase after deluxe or hotness to have an awesome collection of games.
Speak for yourself.
I said you don't have to. You can. So I think that's cool.
Yeah.
That is a nice part that wasn't the case 10 and 15 years ago, and especially 5 years ago when everybody was saying, "Oh, Kickstarters are getting so expensive," and you're not going to be able to get a game for under $100 anymore. And it's like there's 2 games that are almost a Starbucks cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty cool.
No, that is pretty cool. And it's a good point. And just kind of a note, this is at least the 3rd or 4th year where this has happened, right?
Yeah.
I feel like this is the time, like this is the 1 or 2% time out of the year where if you're looking to load up now.
Yeah, so speaking of great games, let's talk about our Spotlight this week. We're going to be talking about Sausage Sizzle. This originally came out in 2012, which I was surprised. I didn't know that, but the recent edition is from 25th Century Games and came out in 2024. The designers are Inca and Marcus Brand, and the art is by Ian O'Toole. It's about 2 to 5 players and 15 minutes long. The game is played over 6 rounds with players taking turns in clockwise order. On your turn, your goal is to roll and re-roll dice to get as many of the same critters on the dice faces together with high values on the food dice. The trick is that you can choose any critter you wish for scoring, but you can only score 1 critter each round, and each critter can only be scored once during the entire game. Normally, a sausage on the food dice counts as 1, but if you manage to lock in all 4 of your food dice showing sausages, the value of the sausage jumps up to 7 that round. And so then you're going to multiply the number of critter faces multiplied by the number of food faces and score that for the round. If you're watching the video, Michael's giving you some great...
My best Zoolander. I was trying to get Doug. I couldn't.
Some visuals here.
Man, like
dice.
You were a drama major or something in a previous life. I was not rattling you.
No, you're not. All right, so what do you like about this one, Michael?
Well, I love the push your luck, and I think so. A couple things. The rule set is incredibly simple and memorable. As just a few moments ago, I was unboxing this deluxeified beauty here from 25th Century. They do such a nice job with their production. And I said out loud, what happens if you roll all sausages? I was trying to remember the multiple, and my wife from one room away shouts, multiplies by 7, and there's just something so memorable. What I just flashed on the screen was 3 sausages and a 2. You'd only get to multiply the number of animals that you have showing by that 2. So when you go for it, it is a casino-ish card game type feel of, or, oh, no, why did I do that? But then your turn comes up again. It also, the other thing that I like about it is it has some similar feelings and mechanisms of games that close in on themselves in a very accessible and compact game, right? This game takes 10 or 15 minutes, but even the first few times you're rolling, it's like, oh, I can. So I want to get the animals by their proper names, Doug, not just Americanize the quokka or the echidna, right?
Nailed
I'm sure
it.
that's how that's pronounced. You got it. Or the platypus. You can just... I like that as the game goes on, you're looking for specific animals and you don't care as much about the points. Whereas in early game, it's all about those points, baby. So there's a lot that I like about it.
Yeah, it's a great push your luck game. I think it's an awesome next step if you like a game like Impact. I think
or Yahtzee.
it adds just like that next level up. But I do like the structure of it more so than a game like Chicken. This game works better for me in that regard because I feel like there's a little bit more variety as you're chasing after those different animals and scoring the different things. It kind of breaks up the monotony of the gameplay. Obviously, it's very lucky, and sometimes you'll do great, and other times not so much. You could do terrible, and it might be a situation where your whole game is terrible. It might just be a couple of rounds are bad, and a couple of rounds are great. So keep that in mind. It is a push your luck game, so playing with younger kids will be, that may be an issue for you. But it's a game that I think I'd like to add to my collection, which is
nice.
Says a lot about the game.
Yeah, it sure does. It travels well too. This I'm showing it on our YouTube channel here, but it's a much smaller box than what I thought when I first saw it. That's not a bad thing. I've taken this and thrown it in my backpack. It's gone on road trips with us, and then the box itself can work as the dice tray. So there are just some things there that I really like. The other thing that's nice is I can look out across the table and see what other people are going for or not going for, just so I get to participate in on their turns. Yes, it's push your luck for me, but I feel like there's some of that. What am I trying to say? Not joiner or complicit.
You're playing vicariously through the other players.
I am, and especially when I see that somebody did get all 4 crocodile, but they only rolled 1 sausage, and maybe their next lowest number, are 5s. But it's like, well, they got to get rid of that sausage. So there you get to see the other strategy and decision making of people that happen as well. The other thing that I will say from a game schooler standpoint, the multiplication and basic math in this is really good for those 8, 9, 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
I would show it here, but our longtime listeners, and you might not be able to tell my 9-year-old from my handwriting. They both look like scribbles. But you can clearly tell that in one game that I played against Doug, I wrote. And then later on that night or in the next day, I played against my 9-year-old, and she's scribbling in her score. It's a fun one. It's actually lived in our living room since we got home from Gen Con. It's one that hasn't made its way down to the studio or been reshelved, which is also pretty rare. We're on kind of a monthly, some games will live up there for 2 months. But basically what I'm saying is if I don't get this thing reclassified into the studio down here, it's at risk of going onto my kids' game shelf and never coming back into my collection. So it's been a good one. A lot of fun. Played it with a lot of different groups. Dead simple teach.
Yeah.
Dead simple teach. So
yeah. All right, well, that's our Spotlight Sausage Sizzle from 25th Century Games and Inca and Marcus brand. We talked about it earlier in the episode, but just want to remind you to check out gameschooler.com/Discord to check out that awesome community there. Spread the word about the podcast if you like what we're doing. And if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to us. Email at gameschooler.com. We'd love to hear from you. Now, let's move on to the game of the week.
The game of the week. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's game is Patrician, Towers of Influence. Doug, give us the stats.
All right, this game originally came out in 2007, but this is a reprinted version, 2024, from Calliope Games and designer Michael Schott. The art is by Andrew Hepworth. 2 to 5 players, 30 to 45 minutes. And this is going to be classified as a family game. And I'm going to say that...
Did you just make that up on the spot? Were you hemming and hawing? I could see the hesitation. Usually you're certain.
No,
okay.
I was trying to make sure that my notes on the ages were correct and not a leftover a copy and paste. But
I did the same thing. Go ahead. Sorry.
The box says 8+. There's no votes for age on Board Game Geek. And I'm going to say that 8 to 9 seems reasonable mechanism-wise, but emotionally, it's probably around a 10.
10 to 12, I would say,
And the reason is we'll explain with how the game works, but there are some things where where you things can be stolen out from under you or moved around, and what you think you had, maybe you don't have. And so emotionally, that's going to be hard for an 8 or 9-year-old to grasp. So welcome to the 13th century in Italy, a time when wealthy patrician families built magnificent towers to represent their power and prosperity. The more influential the family, the taller the tower. You are a master builder ready to profit from the vanity of the patrician families. You take building orders, adding floor after floor, and when a tower is complete, you'll be there to take the credit. At the end of the game, the builder with the most victory points wins. Patrician Towers of Influence is effortless to play. Each turn, play a building card, which allows you to add a tower piece in the matching city. Some cards allow you to take special actions that help you or hinder others. Next, you're going to take the face-up card from the pile next to the city where you just built the tower. As the game goes on, players will continue to build up the various towers, and points are scored for who controls the tallest tower in each city, as well as playing patrician portrait card sets. In the end, the builder with the most points wins. So you're going to have a hand of 3 cards, and on those cards is going to be one of the cities or districts represented, along with a number of pieces, and it may have a patron portrait on the card as well. You are going to play one of your 3 cards into the city that it tells you to, add it to one of the tower spaces there, and then take that building. There will be a building card on that city, which you will then take up into your hand, and then play will proceed clockwise. You refill in the card at the city that you took. Each city has a set number of tower pieces that can be played there, split amongst the 2 towers. Whoever has control of the largest tower in each city is going to score more points than the second closest in the second tower. So there's going to be points awarded out for each tower. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most points from doing that wins. And there's some other set collection type bonus stuff that comes with the patrons. And there's some special ability cards that allow you to move towers from one city to another, which can change things around or move things, which can really add some interesting mechanisms to this game.
Yeah, you want to just touch base on the tiebreaker, like kind of break that down.
Whoever's at the top, whoever's at the top of the tower, if Michael and I, for example, both have 3 pieces on a tower of 6, and whoever happens to be at the top of the tower.
Whoever happens to have that last card in their hand. Oh, Doug just happens to have it right here. I'll just lay that down. Oh, I win the tiebreaker. That only happened like 4 times in our last game. That part's a lot of fun, though. You mind if I just jump in here?
Yeah.
Real quick? I think I was trying to remember the podcast that I listened to. I think it was Eric Summers and Brant.
Right Brain Rollers?
Yeah, I think it was Right Brain Rollers where they talked about a German game. And so I did some research today, like give me the definition of a German game, but everything on Google and all the latest AI with Google was taking it right to a Euro. And the distinction that this other podcaster made that I'm going to absolutely harvest, copy, and steal right now on our show is that the German game has a loop, right? And the loop doesn't change on your turn. It's that the board state is constantly changing because of the loop, so then the decisions vary. And I love that about Patrician. It was the same thing that I liked about Zularetto that we covered in episode 157 of the Game of the Week. It's that, I place a card, or I'm sorry, I place a tile, take a card, place a card, place a piece, take a card. That whole
play a card, place a piece, take a card.
Yes, thank you, Doug. Is just a very enjoyable gaming experience for 2 to 5. Played this at a few different player counts, plays well at 2, plays great at 3. And then all the things, not to just get too far on a tangent there, but all the things that I like about Calliope games that we've covered in the past, just that they're family friendly, they're affordable, they play up to 5 players, all this stuff is packaged and ready to go when you get it. The rules are dead simple. There's a lot going on in that box.
Yeah, you hit on it with the German thing. I did also highlight that this has the feeling of one of the classic Euro games, and I put in there that the rules are simple, the strategy is subtle, but there's no bloat. There's no wasted mechanisms or something where it like, oh, that feels like it was thrown in, or somebody play tested that and threw that in, and it doesn't have any of that. And that ability to do 1 to 3 turn planning makes this game extremely rewarding. And that simple choice of, okay, I have this card to put the tower in, put a piece in that city, but I don't really like the card that's in that city. So do I wait a little bit and go back to there later, and maybe I play a different card, and ooh, that card has some of them have a double build where you can build 2 towers at once.
But if they do that, they probably don't have any patricians on it that are going to contribute to a set. So what do I want to do? Where do I want to diversify? And what do I want to load up on?
So those are very engaging and rewarding decisions that you're making throughout the game. I'm usually not a fan of area control games, but the simplicity of turns in this game and that working a little bit ahead but not being sometimes it feels like you can get boxed out in an area control game, and this one it's like, well, if I'm getting boxed out here, I'm probably doing well over here, and it worked for me.
Yeah, and there's a 2-player variant that just so folks know, so they can make a decision if they're going to run out and get it now or look to pick it up at a different time, play it. But if you only play with 2 players, if you don't play with 3 or 4 players in your home, in your game group, in your community, just know that the 2-player variant varies slightly, where there's essentially, I don't want to call it a bot, but there's
an autonomous player.
Yeah, there's an autonomous player that is impacting how some of the cards come out, and that's not there in a 3-player game. Now, having said that, I actually really like that bot. It doesn't, once I figured out what the heck was going on, and it was uncomfortable for me in that first game because I felt like I was getting robbed. But once I understood what was happening, it started to make sense. Whereas in a 3, 4, and 5-player game, the math is perfect. You're going to know when it's time to give up on a city and move into a different direction. And because all the cards come out, everything gets laid all out there in front of you, and it's just a really enjoyable experience.
Yeah, that I did have that as a thing to be aware of, that autonomous player. I think the game does the best starting at 3. I think that the autonomous player just adds a level of randomness and chaos that does not show up when it's all physical players.
You said that a lot better than I did. That's exactly how it is.
So well, like I said, it's easy to stay invested in this game, watching where the opportunities present themselves. Balancing set collection and tower completion is huge. Michael already touched upon that this game does everything that Calliope Games does well. And one of those is that the game is ready to go right out of the box. There's no token punching. There's no, any of the things that you think that you need to do when you set up most games. And
sorting, sleeving.
I set up a game, opened up a game this past weekend that I bet took me an hour and a half to get organized into a situation that was playable, and this game has none of that.
Yeah.
I think the art does what it needs to do, fits the theme well. Let's see. Is there anything else? I mean, those are my main notes. I think when we played the demo, we kind of knew that it was just like, this works.
Yeah, we got a demo of this in May, And then we actually picked up a copy at Gen Con. And it was a game that we wanted to get at Gen Con because of the demo that we played in May.
Yeah.
Not only did we know that it worked, but we were playing with another couple, and she was clearly a brilliant player, and he was figuring out the game, but also enjoying it. And it was almost like Doug and I were a part of their game group. The demo turned into an entire game because nobody wanted to leave the table. Not in a bad way, but in a very enjoyable way of, as we were learning the game unfolded, and all of a sudden we found ourselves in a pretty intense situation where it's like, oh, who's going to win that area over there? Oh, who gets that bonus? Oh, and that was our demo. We haven't had many of those at the demo table before, so we knew this was one we wanted to talk to everyone about.
What skills do you think are in this one, Michael?
Well, I think comprehension is in this with observation, and I've been coupling those skills together lately. I think it's just at the age that my kids are at, which is 9, 12, and 15. But it's one thing to know how to play a game. It's another thing to be able to observe what is going on the board and to make a decision.
Yeah,
that moment of when to go in on a certain area or when to wait to see if other cards come out that are better. But at the same time, you only have 3 cards in your hand. So what are you going to do and how do you do it? So observing the table, because of how fast the game moves, I think it's pretty easy to, especially I'm talking about at the kiddo age, to kind of play this game mindlessly. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but you can, we started off the segment talking about, an 8-year-old can very much play this game. But a 10, 11, and 12-year-old, you kind of figure out and deduce where they're going to get their points, especially after an initial play, and really engage in the game. So there's a lot of different skills, but those are the 2 that I wanted to start off talking about.
Yeah, that's a good distinction of the idea of at what age can you play a game and at what age can you begin to master a game. And I think that's kind of where that difference is, right? Not to say that you will master it, but you can begin to try to. An 8-year-old's not going to attempt to master this game. They don't have the tool set. Certainly a great game with competition, a game that develops healthy competitive habits as 2 or more parties compete for a goal or reward. And a lot of times it is one of the good things about an area control game is usually that competition or that goal that can't be shared is the end of the game, the final score. This one, because it's an area control game, there are many competitions going on throughout the entire game, which gives those opportunities for many victories and many losses, which leads to the idea of resilience, especially for the younger gamers. This game is going to teach you how to quickly recover and cope with difficulties. You thought you might have won that one. You thought you were getting close, and somebody put the cap on top, and I guess that one's scoring now. And it can be hard as an adult gamer when that happens.
Yeah, that's where I want to jump in. I also had competition in the exact same vein that you just talked about it to put my own personal lens on it. This is one where I feel the losses. And it's like, man, I should have done that better. Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? And I think it's because of that loop of the gameplay. When I lose out on an area, sometimes it's because of what I did to lose out on that area. The timing of when I played a card. And I like that. I know we talk a lot about our skills for younger gamers, but I think even for adult gamers, that competition leads in very nicely to concentration. That's the last skill I want to talk about. And concentration is a game that encourages players to focus their attention or efforts on a task. And within those 3 cards, you still have, 6 different possible choices of where you go because of the card that's going to come back into your hand. And so being able to concentrate and kind of run through all of your options while the board state is changing on each turn, I think there are skills of all ages to pick up on with Patrician. And it's one that I'm cognizant of as I age.
Yeah.
You know, there are certain games that I have where it's like, okay, this game works well for me, but if I'm a 50-year-old, 60-year-old, 70, 80-year-old gamer, this is probably not a game I will be getting out and spending 4 to 6 hours to play on a weekend, right? But Patrician, 45 to 50 minutes, very, very memorable rules, and one that I think can be played with people of all ages, not just, parents with their kids, but also with grandparents as well.
Yeah, it's also got tactical thinking in there, which is probably one of the reasons that I really enjoy it. Because, like you said, you only have 3 cards to play, but you need to be able to change based on what other people are doing. And sometimes it benefits you to kind of load up on a space early, and then it kind of scares other people away from taking those cards, and you might be able to get ahead. And do you do that, or do you try and sneak in at the end, or all those little variations of observing and competing, but limited by your 3 cards means that you can only plan theoretically 3 turns ahead. And by the time your next turn rolls around, the board state has changed, so you need to now deal with a whole set of new circumstances, which may not align with what you thought you were going to do. So it's a great game with simple to learn, easy to set up, fast turns, engaging, people are paying attention, and a boatload of skills to pull out of this one.
Where do you think the best fit is, Doug?
That's a good question. I mean,
I think it is. Thank you.
Certainly it fits into a family game night. I can see it fitting into a hobby game night. I can see this fitting into after school based on, and because it's so simple, and it's like, it's one of the few type of Euro games that I feel like you could sit down and set up and have 3 people run through it and play a game that they're probably not getting a bunch of experience with.
Yeah. I go ahead. Didn't mean to jump in.
No, I mean, that's just, think about the number of Euro games that have a Euro feel that you can play in 30 minutes.
Well, and it has 2024 color. It doesn't have 2016, 2006 brown beige color. There's some pop there. There's some blues in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think this game is gold for game groups that play Euros. And I know that might sound like, oh, that's on the nose, but let me just explain a little bit further. We have a family game day coming up as Thanksgiving weekend. I think this Friday afternoon is when we'll sit down and we'll play, 2 to 3 games as a family. And I'm bringing Zuvadis to the table instead of Patrician, because Patrician for my family is just a bit too dry where we are right now, right? I mean, our range is 9 to 15 with kiddos and then 2 adults in the house, whereas maybe in a decade it'll be perfect. But if I had a game group, and if we were playing Bruges, if we were playing Castles of Burgundy, if we were playing some of those classic Euros, man, Patrician would be an awesome one to throw in there. I wouldn't hesitate to bring that over for game night or with that group. Because of the length of time, that's where I wonder about the community setting. Not that, I mean, it plays fast. You could probably get it done in 30 minutes, but you talked about after school program and some of those. If you have an hour, you're good.
I think what works for me, and I guess maybe I would say reconsider with your family, is that although the theme and the Euro-ness of it can be drab, because the competition is happening, it forces you to be engaged and observe. And so if you ever wanted to talk about the idea of like a gateway Euro, this would be it. This would be a step in that it's like, if you're just talking to me about the theme, I'm going to say, no, my kids are not going to be interested. If I talk about, where the artwork looks, I don't know if they're going to be interested. But once the game starts getting played,
oh, it's awesome.
And they're putting the tower on top of Dad's tower, and claiming something that I thought I was going to get, that kind of competition and the fast turns. And it's like, oh, okay, I play a card, I put a thing down, I pick up a card. That type of stuff is what leads me into, I don't know, it might not work in that setting, but I'm very interested to try it.
Yeah, you should. And there is a ton of game in this little box. It's like a half size of what a Ticket to Ride box would be, a quarter size. I mean, I fit it long ways in a half calyx, if that makes sense to any of our listeners.
Yeah, and it includes some of the original expansions and a couple of variants in there as well that we didn't even touch upon. So there's more than just the base game in the box, which is pretty cool as well. Anything else on that one?
No, great game.
All right, that is our game of the week, Patrician Towers of Influence from Calliope Games and designer Michael Schott.
The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, and etiquette and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. I lost what we're going to talk about this
week. We're going to be talking about being a hobby ambassador. So we talked about not too long ago, things we wish we could tell people that are not gamers. And this is almost the list of things I would like to tell other gamers. And so often when I listen to board game media, podcasts, other shows, things like that, people are always talking about the idea of being a hobby ambassador. How can we get more people into the hobby? And we always need to make new gamers and stuff like that. So I kind of wanted to address and talk about that as a concept. What do you think, Michael?
Oh, I wanted you to lead in so I don't go off the deep end. This took me back to being a teacher and being a principal in the schoolhouse very quickly. The conceit of the content. So there are certain teachers who really believe that they are real teachers because they teach a very specific content. And so as I was, doing the research for this and being a better ambassador, it really took me back to some of my early days as an educator and who some of those great ambassadors were as other educators, where I thought, man, I want to be as welcoming and open and honest as those educators. And I really hope I never turn into that teacher who the only class that matters is there. I'm trying not to list specific subjects because I don't want people to associate any real humans, but enter name of class here. And I think there's a lot of that in the hobby as well, that sometimes there is some very, very, there are high levels of conceit for the specific content area that people are most passionate about. And I've run into that and I have to be careful of that with myself. But whether you're this type of gamer or that type of gamer, if you're a war gamer, there's this constant sense to like label and identify what type of gamer you are, what type of games you like, and then put that order and type and list in a list that can be sortable and rankable. And I think some of those things that are so much fun in the hobby of sorting and ranking and organizing can also lead to putting up very high barriers of entry for other folks to really come in and engage.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a basic note of just like, stop judging the games that other people enjoy. Like, if somebody else enjoys it, who cares? Like, if somebody wants to play war games, that's awesome. Like, play war games. Everybody can love what they love. That's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But the second that you start looking down because other people don't love what you love, or somebody else loves what you don't like or you think is boring, then we got a problem. I guess my list is a kind of a list of, it's like a bill of rights of amendments of, please stop doing this or don't do that. For example, stop assuming that everybody knows what you're talking about. and we run into this. We try and do the best that we can, but there's nothing more off-putting than talking to somebody about a subject that you know very little of, and they go straight into jargon, and you're left in the dust. And it's really hard to be a hobby ambassador if you just assume everybody knows what you're talking about all the time with your lingo of Kickstarters and Euros and you name it. Throw in a mechanism, a term, category. I think we can all do a better job of trying to explain it when we're talking to non-gamers or people that are new into the hobby. Do you remember running into that when you were first getting into the hobby at all?
I still run into it, and that's where some of the reviewers and people that I listen to watch, I really appreciate when they put definitions around what they're talking about and also boundaries around their opinion.
Yeah.
So this game worked for me. This game did not work for me. And then provide the bullet list as to why, so that it's not just a statement of fact of this game is the best of the year or this game is garbage. Nobody should buy it. Why is it so overproduced over this, over that? It's like, hold on, just back up. I got a little lost here.
Yeah.
So
no, that's a great
one. I still run into it. I think, and coming into the hobby, I think the first 6 months or so at your game night, I was lost, but I was happily lost because at the same time I was still learning.
Yeah.
And so that's the only thing that I really want to say about being a hobby ambassador is in sharing this wonderful hobby of playing board games and all that goes with it. Allowing other people to learn requires that I, as a player, am still learning too. You know what I mean? And so I'm trying to play new games all the time and learn more about other games so that I can, because I enjoy that part of the hobby. I really do. I enjoy getting out into different edges and parts of the wilderness that I haven't been into yet. But boy, it doesn't. I've sat at a few tables and some very recently at recent conventions and just felt like I was back at my first game night, like just blissfully lost. So
another thing I've got is the idea of stop using friends and family members to play the games that you want to, and almost treating them as like I just need extra.
Attacked.
No, that's not. No, but just the idea of I just need more bodies to play the game that I want to play, and I don't care about anybody else's enjoyment at the table. I think there is a because there are so many games that come out, and we get enthralled by games, and we see it on a video or it's the hotness, and we're like, oh, I want to play that game so bad, and we buy it, and then it sits on our shelves, and we have nobody to play it with, and it's like the first warm body you see, like, let's play this game, with no regard to whether that game is at the level of that player, if that will fit or work with them, or if they're interested. And it's like, you want to talk about turning somebody off from the hobby, being that guy that's like, hey, you want to play a game with me? You want to play a game with me? And then you never care about what games the other players might want to play or are interested in. That's a kiss of death if you're trying to get more people to enjoy the hobby.
Yeah. Should we just going to keep going down our list here?
Sure.
React and respond. I think another one is to encourage people to, when somebody shows an interest in a different part of the hobby, it might not be my interest, but I do think part of being an ambassador for board gaming is to bring new people with, but then also encourage people if they have a different preference of a place they want to go. One of my children got involved in Dungeons and Dragons and kind of brought me along for the ride. And we went to a few, more than a few, but a half dozen adventure leagues, and I talked about it at work. Next thing I know, one of my colleagues is at Adventure League, and it's just one of those things. If I feel like that sense of wonder and awe that's in the hobby, the more that can be encouraged with the learning piece, I think it is a great way to be an ambassador. And at the same time, also defining what I want. And that's what I just want to add into the last comment you made about we must play this game now because, I think there's a fine line that, hey, I'd really like to try this game, or I want to have that type of gaming experience to, we must play this game now. There's a tough needle to thread there, I think, sometimes.
Well, and it's like, but the difference.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not. It's not necessarily even demanding, but
there's
it's
an
like
intensity to it.
If you've asked 3 times and people have said no, it's time to move on. The next thing on my list is probably going to be the most controversial, but it's the one that I would stand by the most from the experiences that I've had and just seeing, we see a different side of the hobby because we cater towards the edges of family gamers and there are people in the hobby that are more invested than we are. But the point that the hill I'll die on is almost the antithesis of what we're talking about, which is stop trying to convert everyone to be a gamer at the same level you are. I would love to have more gaming friends. I would love to have more people that are just as passionate as I am, but not everybody is a gamer. Not everything is a nail. You can't just keep hitting it with a hammer. And I think there's this kind of broad stroke of like, well, you should be a hobby ambassador and we need to get more people. And it's like, we do, and it's awesome to get more people. And I want people to have the same cool experiences that I have had. At the same time, what experiences are we giving them? And if we're acting like you can't just play a game once a month and have a good time, and then you're not a real gamer, or you're not, well, they're not one of us. Like that idea that we need to indoctrinate them, to me, just seems crazy. Like, can we just focus on creating awesome experiences and more than one, building them up? It's more powerful than having a single playthrough of your favorite game. And if we're focusing more at meeting gamers at their level and choosing games that we think they will like or fit into their skill level. And I'm talking about when you're trying to reach out to your friends and families. You're a gamer and you want to reach out to, gosh, I wish I could get my brother to play more games. It's like, maybe it's just not, he's never going to get there. But that doesn't mean you can't have awesome experiences playing games with them when you're thinking about them. And instead of throwing the whole breadth of your collection at them and saying, well, this is a great game, and 9 out of 10 critics agree that it's awesome. It's like, no, my brother might like this game that's dopey and 15 minutes long, but we're going to laugh and have a great time.
I could tell you've either recently come for playing games with your brothers or you're getting ready to play games with your brothers.
Neither.
No? Neither?
No.
Okay. No, that's good. It's interesting because what I have in my notes here is I feel like I'm the best at being an ambassador when I am the clearest on my limitations for my time, treasure, and talent. And we've joked earlier in the episode about my ability to teach Darwin's Journey. But I think just knowing where those limitations are on a game that I can teach independently and get it started up and going, that matters even at a game night, and communicating out to the group of, hey, you'll want to watch this video. You'll want to come somewhat prepared. I think I can get this going, but I've only played it half solo. Like, just knowing where my limitations are as an individual player, I think are also important. And also like budget. This is a luxury hobby. Yeah. You know what I mean? So like just being clear with everyone in my kind of sphere, especially in my own house, just about what some of those limitations are and where I'm going with this thing. And then that comes back to time. We celebrate like conventions and getting away and having game days. That's all time, and that is, I'm not being a good ambassador of the hobby if I'm not being a present husband and father. This is a hobby. And it's one that I love. It's one I'm very passionate about. But the better I can be at communicating, especially with my spouse and my children, of, hey, these are the 4 days out of the year where I'm at this regional convention. It is on the calendar. I'm going. These are the 4 days that I go to this national convention. I'm going. And then, that took me a few cycles, a few years to get to where sometimes I wasn't even a very good ambassador in my home, because I think over time, just being very clear on where the limitations are has kind of helped me to be a better ambassador.
Yeah, and you're not walking around trying to convert everybody you see and everybody in your house to become a gamer.
Yeah, not anymore.
You're not.
No,
well, but that it is something that happens. I think it goes. I think new gamer enthusiasm falls into that, where you're like, I love this and I want to share it with everybody, but it always never comes out that way. That's the intention, is like, I'm having an awesome experience. I want you to also have an awesome experience, but it comes off as, play these games with me. Come here.
A straight conversion experience, right? If you don't,
and so, realizing that's like, my kids like different games, and none of my kids are interested in gaming to the level that I'm interested in gaming, and that's okay. Like, I don't need to raise the next generation of gamers to fill my shoes. Eventually the lights on weekly game night will go out. I don't expect my family or my kids to keep the lights on, keep it running. It's my job to create the next Jedi. But I think that sometimes there is that feeling like that's something that we're all supposed to do. It's like you're supposed to find people that love it as much as you do. And I just think that's unfair to people, to gamers, to kind of put that burden on them, and unfair on the people around them to just let them enjoy what they enjoy.
Yeah, that's the last word that I was thinking about too, as you were talking, is this hobby is meant to be enjoyed. This is not a job except for a very, 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 very select few. The hobby is not a job, and it's meant to be enjoyed. So to be an ambassador, there is a level of joy and can-do attitude that I think really helps. Of, no, we can play this, we can figure it out, or we can't because the rule book's busted. Ah ha ha ha! We had this experience because it's a junk of a rule book. Ah ha ha ha! Let's move on to the next game. But that sense of being able to enjoy this hobby and do it in a way where you're bringing some joy to it, I think really does help.
Yeah. No, great points there. All right. Well, let's move on to the high five. If you're anything like us, you're constantly on the hunt for new games to try out. This week, Michael and I are going to talk about our high five game filters. So how do you pick out what games you're going to try out? What are the things that you think about? I'm not sure if my list is in any order. I think they are, but essentially it's more of, these are 5 things I look at like a rubric of, if a game meets maybe 3 out of the 5 of these, it has a chance of getting on my radar. But it's like kind of like 5 tick boxes, like, nope, gone, see ya. Or, ooh, it's got this tick box, I'll look at it a little bit more. Is that how you approached it, or?
Yeah, the topic was filters for weeding out games. That's how I read it. So I tried to just be as honest and candid as I could on where I am, and as we begin to close down 2024 and head into 2025. I probably should have put it on there, but number 5 for me is if Michael likes that, and that's cost. This is one that's real. I have a game, Foundations of Rome, that sits in a bottom cubby of my Calyx. Thing comes out once to twice per year, and I think it's a great game. But I'll tell you what, one of the first things, I can't get that thing to the table without people either saying or wondering or commenting on the cost of it. Yeah, and to the point where I don't know if I have 8 plays or a dozen plays now, but to the point where it's like, yeah, that's real. And that filter may not have been there when I initially made the purchase for that, but it is certainly there now. And a lot of games do get weeded out because of cost.
Yeah, great one. That's not on my list, but is a good one because money is no object to me. No, it's a great filter.
Scrooge McDuck over there.
Yeah, it's usually probably
sitting on
because
piles.
it's like it's automatic. Like if something goes up that far, I'm like, yep, gone. I don't even think about it as a weeding thing because it just is a natural filter.
Yeah. On the next episode of DuckTales, Doug, what's your number 5?
I'm going to dive into a mound of cash. My number 5 is a designer or publisher. Kind of put those two together, and it kind of works in both ways. Of if it's a publisher that I like a lot of their stuff. If Days of Wonder announces a game, I'm gonna take a look at it. If Antoine Bauza is going to make a game, or Phil Walker Harding, I'm going to take a look at it.
Or Reiner Knizia, I'm going to take a look at it.
Yeah. At the same time, there are some where it's like I've played several of certain publishers' games or designers, and it's like, they just haven't hit for me. And how many times you want to go back to that well? So there are those things that sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, that I'll look at and say yay or nay, whether that's fair or not. I don't know. Who cares? It's my list for weeding things out, but it is definitely something that I take a look at.
That's awesome. Yeah, that is really good. So do I, and it didn't make my list, and it probably should have. Number 4 for me when weeding out or filtering a game. And I'm being honest here, folks. I know I rag on this a lot, but the Board Game Geek rating and forum, it does matter for me, especially if I'm considering a purchase before I've ever laid eyes on it. If I see that something is rated an 8 or an 8.4, and if it has thousands of ratings or hundreds of ratings, some of that I don't just chalk up to the Kickstarter bias, right? If the game's 2 or 3 years old, and if I'm going through the forums and maybe the only questions are really rules, or if they're in the general section, there's a ton of variants and riffs off of this and riffs off of that, and it shows like, wow, that's a level of enthusiasm that this game has. Like a little subculture for this one little game, or this game has developed its own IP. That rating and forum system has really helped me with weeding out games, but also paying attention to not being so dismissive to games, because sometimes I've been on the other end of it. Well, it's just got these huge minis. It's got this, it's got that. It's got all these reasons why it wouldn't work. But the forum works both ways. Whereas if I see like a game is a 5.9, that's one that probably has some problems that I'm not even going to entertain investing the time in on a 10-point scale. So that's my number 4.
Yeah, also not on my list. It is certainly, I don't pay attention to the high ones. I will pay attention to the low ones, but I'll ignore the low ones depending on what the audience is. The Board Game Geek audience is a very specific group of gamers, but there are times where I'm like, I have no idea. I rarely do I ever even look at that rating.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Almost as an afterthought would I look at it and be like, well, I'm either going to say, I didn't think it was that bad, or geez, how could this be so low? Or, but never in my planning stages of like, am I going to play this? Do I ever look at those rankings? So maybe I should. My number 4 is going to be mechanisms. So if I see, something's got auction or silent bidding, area control, whatever my bluffing, definitely bluffing. Yeah. Gosh, there are certain things that I'll look at and it's
count
like,
me in, count Doug out.
Won't necessarily, now if it's bluffing, I'm probably going to be out. So somebody else will have to get me to play the game, but I'm not going to pick that one myself. those will have an influence on me. If I see hand management and set collection, I'm going to be more interested in those type of things. Not as, it's not as much of a deciding factor as the other things that are higher on my list, but it is definitely something that I pay attention to. Even something like where if I just was kind of scrolling through the PAX Unplugged preview list, and there was, some that jumped out at me, and then it's like I see a thing like a trick-taking game, and it's like, I'm not going to get that to the table, or I already have a bunch of trick-taking games. So it's, sometimes I see those mechanisms, and it's like, it's a filter of like, I don't need to try another one, and unless I, start hearing a whole bunch of stuff about, oh, this is amazing, then I'll take a look at it. But the mechanisms can be a pretty big filter for me. So that is my number 4.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting that we have different filters. I think that's we're stumbling onto some of the magic of our show here. I say that with all humility and complete sincerity at the same time. Number 3 for me is horror theme. It is something
horror theme.
Horror, yes.
Okay.
HORROR theme. That is a filter that I use for weeding out a game. When I engage in playing games, that is not a theme that I enjoy. And it's just me personally. I completely understand why people love the genre. I get it. I have friends who love the genre. The neighborhood in which I live in, the amount of money that people put into Halloween, there's clearly some of my neighbors that love the genre. But for me, it is a filter that I rule out, sometimes to my own detriment. I delayed on playing Return to Dark Tower for far too long because I had this false perception that there was more horror in that game than there was just a little bit of dark fantasy. But we moved to Wisconsin right in the summer of Jeffrey Dahmer, and as a 9-10-year-old kid, I could tell you that had an impact on me. So adults, you know who I'm talking about. It's just one of those things that I don't really like to bring into my tabletop gaming and hobby, and I think because of that, there's a whole swath of games that I haven't played, and some that I probably never will play. And I'm sure they're great games. They're just not ones that I've invested in.
Interesting. My number 3 is playtime. It's not necessarily a disqualifier, but if I pull up Board Game Geek and I see a 240-minute game there, it's got to have some other real shiny bling on it. That's going to make, my number 2 and number 1 are going to have to be thoroughly satisfied for me to take another look. Once it gets over to 90 and 120 minutes, it has to be something where I'm like, I'm invested in this for other reasons that I think it's worth the squeeze, essentially. Because when I see that long playtime, I think, 120 minutes, I can get 4 30-minute games or 2 60-minute awesome games instead of necessarily one game that I don't know if I'm going to like. And if I don't like it, I feel like I've wasted my precious, you're talking about time, talent, and treasure, that time aspect of it. When I've only got so much time in a week for a game night and getting games to the table, sometimes playing that 2-hour game, if it doesn't work out, I feel just as devastated, like I've wasted time. And so I tend to stay away from those more often than not. Certainly I have games that are that take that long. Of course, with everything, there's exceptions to all of these things for weeding them out. But it is definitely a factor of something I look at. Awesome.
Yeah, and can't argue with that logic there. For me, number 2 is, does it play solo? Almost very similar to what Doug just said about can you get it played in under an hour, but basically the complete opposite. Is this a game that I don't mind if it's 240 minutes as long as I can break that up over 3 weeks and make sure that I get it played and get the experience and can see how the game works? And is it one that I might eventually get to play with friends? Maybe, but if I get to play that again and I really enjoyed it, that has moved up on my filter over the last 3+ years, probably more than any of these. If I were re-ranking them now, I probably should have put Cost at 1, but Does It Play Solo would still be in that 2 category because of what we just talked about in the previous segment about being an ambassador for the hobby. If I bring a game into my house, I don't want to have to pressure another human, including one of my best friends on planet Earth, Doug Kotecki, who I co-host this podcast with, and we play games every single week, and we're coming up on 200 episodes. There are times where I don't want to have to, hey, Doug, do you want to play this? Do you want to play that? There are times where it's just, I want to get to the table. I want to be able to go through it at my own pace. I want to put the game through its paces. And I have found that I enjoy playing games solo in a very similar way that I once enjoyed playing video games. You know, when it was NCAA football and or building a franchise in Madden or any of those, any of the Zelda game, any of those like experiences. The difference is I don't have 30 or 40 hours to drop into a video game, but I might have 3 to 5 hours over 2 to 3 weeks to drop into a board game. So that's one that I personally look at. I know a lot of humans wouldn't, but for me, it is a filter in weeding out games.
Well, I think it lines up with my playtime. I think they're both accomplishing the same thing. It was like, can I actually get these to the table?
Yep. Exactly.
And whether it's me saying, I don't know when I'm going to get a 240-minute game to the table, and you saying, that's great. I love this game. It's 60 minutes, but if it's going to sit on the shelf because Doug has a copy, I want to be able to play it and get it off the shelf more regularly. So that's a great choice there. My number 2 goes hand in hand with playtime usually, and that's complexity. If I go on Board Game Geek and I see a 3.5 or a 4, I'm going to be thinking about it because I know the amount of effort that it goes to learning a game that has that level of complexity, teaching a game that has that level of complexity, and setting up a game that has that amount of complexity. All of those things go into it.
Preach, Doug. Why do I make these mistakes? Preach.
Even if it says 60 minutes, but the complexity is 3.5, there's other things going on under the hood that are going to make that a problem to get to the table because of all of those things. And it is a thing that I've been burned on where it's like, oh, that looks kind of interesting. And then those are the games that you have to read the rules the 30 minutes before you play the game, because if you don't, 45 minutes after reading the rules, they will be wiped from your brain. They're so not sticky. There's all these exception rules. And the only way that I can figure out how to weed those out is by looking at the Board Game Geek complexity ratings, their weighting, which is funny too, because you have to know that they inherently, because the people doing those ratings are hobbyists, are putting them probably a point lower than they should be. So if something actually shows up as a 3.5, it's probably a 6.8 in the Board Game Geek scale. And so you just kind of have to temper that, where people think Ticket to Ride is as easy as patty cake.
Slapjack.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's a new hotness, Michael. I can't wait to hear more about that game. So that's my number 2, complexity.
Awesome. My number 1 is just a question. Does it look fun?
Oh, no, that's weird.
That is a filter for weeding out games.
Yeah.
I think that comment stands on its own. What is drawing me to that game? And so that's my number 1. Does it look fun?
Yep. I think that lines up with my number 1 in a different way, but mine is theme. And my theme, the theme is, what's the game about? How does the artwork look? And all of those things contribute into, does it look fun for me? Whether it's a subject matter that I'm, not familiar with, but I'm going to be honest, if I see abstract games, usually not high on my radar. Like, I need substance in there. I think it makes it easier to teach. I think it makes it easier to learn. And I think they make them more fun. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
I don't, again, there's exceptions to all of these. I have abstract games in my collection, but the ones I enjoy the most have a theme that's usually different. There's not a ton of games that fall into kind of the tropey, I'm a sucker for a Western game. I'm a sucker for, well, a whole bunch of themes, but
Not many, Doug. Not many you get suckered on. For me, with the does it look fun? If some of the other barriers haven't been met, so if the game costs
Sure.
too high, or if there's a theme that I might not enjoy, or if it doesn't play solo, but if it looks fun, and if the rating is high on BGG, I'll invest the $2 or $4 in the 2 or 4 hours and sit down and play it and get to try out and have that experience at a convention or at a game store day where they have a game day. And so that's part of it too. Some of it is not just for procuring the game. It's if I want to try the game. So
yeah. Well, and like I said at the top of the segment, it is more of it's not a linear thing. It's like if a game has an awesome theme, but the playtime and complexity are long, Scarface 1920, but I think the mechanisms and the theme are cool, they can override that it's a complex game with a longer playtime, and if it's a short, fast game that's not very complex, but it's an abstract, that can work too. So it's kind of, none of these are absolute, which I think is what kind of makes it interesting hearing the different things, because nobody just decides on one filter, right?
Yeah.
It's always a combination of them. So let us know in the Discord or email us if there's any that you think stand out or which filters you use to decide which games to try or buy. I'd love to hear if there's stuff that we missed. I'm surprised that we had as many different filters as we did, And some of them are similar, just maybe worded a little bit differently, but
yeah, I'm really interested to see what comes up in our Discord and see how people filter games in and out. Everybody's different, and that's I'm interested to see where that goes.
yeah, one of the joys of the hobby. Everybody is different. Subscribe to the podcast and follow us on X at GameSchoolerU. We'd love to hear from you, and we appreciate your support. Next week, we're going to be talking about Magic Mountain and cooperative games, and we're going to talk about should you import a game, which I'm interested to hear Michael's thoughts on that one. So thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.